Now, this is quite a complicated slide, and there are dedicated webinars, and there's one that I did a few months ago just on this topic. So if you want more information about the single assessment framework, that is online, that is on YouTube, and I think there's plenty of material on our internet. But one of the reasons we're changing our operational teams is because our regulatory framework, the way that we do regulation, is changing with the introduction of the single assessment framework. This will be introduced at some point next year in 2023. Our new assessment framework will be built on our 5 key questions that you will be familiar with, and also our well-known rating system, and is what we will use to set out our view of quality and also to make judgments. We want to use what we're calling I statements as a starting point for the assessment framework, taking the important first step towards truly regulating through the eyes of the public, and in particular through the eyes of those who are receiving care. As I said, you can find more information on the single assessment framework on our YouTube channel and also on our website. Another reason we're changing is that we now have powers in the recent Health and Social Care Act to assess local authorities and integrated care systems. So it's important that our teams are structured to take a view across systems and to form a view about care in a local area, as well as the deep dive into individual providers and sectors that we do at the moment. So let me start to show you a few sort of organograms. Right, this is where we've come from. This slide shows the operational structure you will have come used to, and this was in place until March this year. And you will see that it is built around 3 chief inspectors who are each head of their sectors, and they manage directorates that were responsible for our regulatory activity within their specialism, adult social care, for example. And they had a number of deputy chief inspectors who both led the regulatory leadership effort looking upwards, but also managed the operational teams looking downwards. In April, we moved to a different structure that I will talk about, but we moved to a different structure at senior levels with the creation of the operations group, which I lead, and also the regulatory leadership function, which is now headed up by our 2 chief inspectors, Kate Taroney and Sean O'Kelly. I'm not going to be talking about the regulatory leadership function today. That's for the seminar we've got on the 5th of December. So let me talk about how we're changing. So we started to bring together our sector teams, adult social care, hospitals, primary medical services and mental health into one operations group. So all of the previous operational directorates have been brought together into a single operations group. This is comprising 4 geographical areas or networks, as you can see on the map on the side of the slide, a national operations directorate, and a central hub, and these will be supported by a number of new roles that I'll come on to in a minute. And this is sort of the new structure at a senior level. As I said, we have 4 geographical networks. We've got the North, we've got the Midlands, and Lorraine is the director for the Midlands. We have London and the East of England, a single network, London and the East, and then also the South. And the way that we have drawn those and the way we decided on the boundaries of those was by having a look at the regulatory effort so that they were broadly balanced in terms of the amount of work we thought that the teams would need to do. Within these networks, over the coming months, we're going to divide ourselves into teams at a local level. And within the 4 networks, in total, we'll have around 110 to 115 teams, and we're calling these integrated assessment and inspection teams. And these will include colleagues with a mix of expertise and experience of different types of health and social care services. And each of the teams, each of the 110 to 115 integrated teams will cover primary and secondary care, adult social care and mental health. And so this means bringing people together who have different perspectives to give us the best possible view of services across a local area. So rather than looking at things through the segmentation of a specialism, we'll be bringing people together so that we can properly start to take a view on what care is looking like in a local area. Our teams will include a mixture of new roles, and these will be called inspectors, as of now, assessors, regulatory coordinators and regulatory officers, and I'll talk about those roles over the course of during the course of the rest of this presentation. And then we'll have a helpful 2-minute video that will show you how the team will work together. We'll take a scenario. Each of the teams will be led by an operations manager, and they'll contain a mix of the roles that I've just talked about, depending on the services in a particular area. There'll be around 9 to 12 people in each team, including the manager. And while inspector and assessor colleagues will retain their sector specialism, so that means that an assessor and an inspector, and I'll talk about what those roles are in a minute, will be a specialist in adult social care or secondary care or mental health. They will also have access to senior specialists in each sector at a higher grade who will provide additional expertise in addition to our continued use of specialist advisors. As part of the wider operations group, we've also established a national operations directorate, and this brings together our registration team, so the team who register those of you who are coming into the market or who are changing use or changing manager, but it also includes teams such as those who regulate oral health, so inspect dentists, and the teams who are involved in inspecting children's services or prisons or immigration removal centres. And all of the colleagues across the operations group in the 4 networks and in the national operations will be supported by a central hub, and the hub will monitor performance, risk and assurance, oversee wellbeing, learning and development, share best practice and standards, and also ensure consistency. So we now have a senior leadership team in place that leads our operations group. That's me and six directors, and the director roles, such as Lorraine's, replace the previous role of the deputy chief inspector that you will have become familiar with. Let me start to go through each of the roles in a bit more detail, because I realise that was a bit of a whistle stop. And then the short video that we'll show you will tell you how the roles all come together, hopefully. So the first of these is the operations manager. The operations manager will be the leader of each of the integrated assessment and inspection teams. They will work for a deputy director within one of the 4 geographical networks, and the ops manager will lead the team by setting personal objectives, providing pastoral support, and ensuring that the team as a whole, including the sector specialist at assessor and inspector level, work together to form a view on how care is given across the integrated system and local area. The ops manager will manage some of the strategic relationships that the team will need to form, and will also have a role in overseeing enforcement. I think the closest equivalent we have at the moment is what we call the inspection manager, which you may be familiar with, whereas the inspection manager is also involved a lot more in the regulatory detail. The ops manager, the operations manager, will be much more, their key role will be about leading the team with consistency in order to make sure that we are able to perform to the best of our ability. And I think the other difference is that the operations manager will lead people who are specialists in all of the 4 sectors, adult social care to mental health, and not just one. At the moment, the inspection managers are specialists in adult social care, primary medical services, etc. The operations manager will bring together people from all of those specialisms into a single integrated team. And the ops manager and their team will get deep level sector advice from a bank of senior specialists. I'll come on to that shortly. The next role is a new role, and this is an assessor, and actually they will be formed out of people who are currently doing inspector roles. These will be specialists in a particular sector, so they will be specialised in adult social care, for example, and their role will be to assess and analyse all the information we have available about the providers in their area. That's so that we can make judgments and decide on action, such as whether we need to cross the threshold, whether enforcement is necessary. The type of information they may assess includes the intelligence, insights and data we hold on a particular provider, so a care home, for example, alongside any give feedback on care, whistleblowing and safeguarding alerts. So for the first time, we will have a person whose role it is to be on top of all of the information, all all of the data, all of the alerts that we have got about a particular provider, so that we can then start to really take a comprehensive view of that provider, of the service, of the care they're providing, and therefore we can decide whether there are any interventions we want to take, including whether to do a cross the threshold inspector. I think the advantage of this role, some of which is done by our current inspectors, is that more consistently will allow us to have a more current view on more providers of care than we manage at the moment, where inspection tends to be the main vehicle for our regulatory contact. I think we will be able to use our data and our intelligence and the information being given to us by those receiving care, their relatives, or other people giving us feedback. We'll be able to use all of that to have a more rounded view of all of the providers that we regulate at any one time, and then we will be able to take different intervention steps depending upon what the information is telling us. The next role is the inspector. And this is probably more familiar to you, and I think that the inspector role will be broadly similar to the role we've got at the moment. They will be at the same level as the assessor. And so they will be peers, they will be colleagues. Whatever the inspector does, they will agree with the assessor. There won't be a command and control relationship. They will also be a sector specialist. So an inspector will continue to specialise in adult social care or hospitals, for example. We're not going to have a situation routinely whereby we would expect an adult social care inspector to go and inspect a hospital. That deep sector knowledge that our inspectors have at the moment will remain. They will agree with the assessor when we need to cross the threshold in a targeted way to cover a particular area or to respond to a particular concern. So I think what we will be doing is moving away from the comprehensive inspection approach that we've got at the moment. We'll be using all of the data that the assessor will be analysing to form that comprehensive view of a provider, and then I think the cross the threshold inspections will be more targeted, because they will be looking at a particular area of practice or improvement, or a particular area of concern, rather than doing the comprehensive approach that we do at the moment, meaning that we'll be able to do more targeted inspections, and probably we do comprehensive inspections at the moment. The inspector will then write up their findings. That will be fed back into the assessor, and that will form part of the feedback that we will give you as a provider on a regular basis of what the information we hold about you says, and that will also be the information that we publish on our website. Next up is a new role, which is the regulatory coordinator. Is a cross-cutting role, so they will work with all the other members of the team, and they will provide support to the whole of the team, particularly the assessor and the inspector, and their job is to make sure that the rest of the team, particularly the assessor and inspector, have all the information that they need. They will also carry out some of the day-to-day engagement activity with providers and local groups, and I'll talk about relationship management at the end. And we are currently recruiting for regulatory coordinators for each of our integrated teams, and I'm hoping that we will have we'll have a cadre of colleagues in those roles who will really be able to add value and helping to make sure that the team as itself gels and is more than the sum of its parts. The next role is a role I've talked about a bit already up to now, which is the senior specialist, and this is another new role. And the role of the senior specialist will be to provide specialist sector level advice to a number of teams across our networks. They'll be the same level as an operations manager, and although they will work closely with operations, they will also be supported by our regulatory leadership colleagues, and they will be able to draw on advice from the deputy directors and chief inspectors in regulatory leadership in order to form the view on the advice that they will give to the colleagues in operations. We will have senior specialists in areas such as adult social care, secondary care, primary care, mental health, learning disability and safeguarding. And I think the parallel I would draw is that at the moment, if an inspector is on site and comes across something they're not quite sure what to do, do with, I'll use an example that I've seen, is where we came across a DBS check containing a person that had been barred. Because this was the first time the inspector had come across this, they weren't quite sure what advice to give to the manager of the establishment we were in. Therefore, they phoned their inspection manager for advice. They got the advice, they fed back to the manager took that action. What they would do in the new world is that they would probably speak to the sector specialist, and they would set out the situation and say, what do you think I should do? They'd be given the advice, pass that on to the manager of the establishment, and we would be in a similar situation. But it's when you're looking for advice that is sector specific that you would go to the sector specialist, rather than the more leadership, performance management, managing the performance of the team type of advice, which you would go to your operations manager, your line manager about. And then the final one of the new roles, and then I'll pause and let you watch the video, is the regulatory officer. This is another cross-cutting role, and the role of the regulatory officer in support of the coordinator really will be to make sure that the team is able to operate properly, both on the site and off. So that's what the team looks like, from the leader to the regulatory officer, and how the assessor and inspector role will be created and what they will do. I'll hand over to Steph to show a quick video now that hopefully will give you a bit more of a sense of how it all comes together.
This is a short illustrative scenario to help you understand how our teams might work together in the future. We receive a series of whistleblowing concerns alongside a number of give feedback on care submissions, raising questions about the quality of care at a residential adult social care service. As the lead for maintaining an ongoing view of quality and risk in services across a local area, the assessor, specialising in adult social care in the team, recognises that on-site evidence is required, and alongside evidence collected from various sources, they add an on-site visit to the schedule of evidence collection to be completed for this service. Working together, the inspector and regulatory coordinator start planning their inspection. This will involve focusing on what evidence they need to prioritise collection of, using the required evidence categories as their guide. To supplement the evidence collected on inspection, the assessor also wants to get feedback from partners and further evidence of people's experiences. Working with the regulatory officer in the team, they schedule a phone call with the local commissioner and the local health watch network to help them bring together a more holistic view of quality across the local area. Both the assessor and inspector also meet with their colleagues in the same team specialising in hospitals and talk about how the discharge process is working in the local hospital. They also include senior specialists in adult social care and hospitals to provide additional expertise. Working together, the assessor and the inspector agree scores for the evidence collected before the assessor brings together the final judgment, including the feedback from partners, and completes the assessment process, and the scores and rating are updated following completion of the factual accuracy process.
Three reasons why we're doing this. Firstly, so we can take an informed view across the local area. To a point I keep repeating, but I think in the era of integrated care systems, it's particularly important that we are able also to take a cross-system view, a cross-area view, as well as a deeper view of each individual provider. We want to be able to provide a more up-to-date view of quality than we can at the moment. Quite often, what we do is conditioned by the inspection process, and sometimes some of you won't have been inspected for quite a period of time, and therefore the view of the service that you're providing that the public can see from us might be out of date, and also we're hoping it will allow us to better support you. And what it means for you is that things will remain unchanged until the spring. And as from the early new year, we will start to transition into our new teams, awaiting the rollout of our new technology and the single assessment framework. So from January, the teams as they're arranged at the moment, very much in their sector teams, will start to transition into their new integrated teams. They will be able to get to know each other. They'll be able to make the relationships with the providers in their area. They will be able to make sure that we're doing the handovers of our people with new line managers properly. And so we will spend a good period of time in the early new year transitioning into those new teams while we're still carry on doing our role. This is very much fixing the aircraft in flight. And then from probably the spring, we will be fully into our new teams, and we will be awaiting the rollout of our new technology, which is our regulatory platform, which is going to be a much more up-to-date interface with you, and also the single assessment framework. Once we've rolled all of that out, once all of our people have been trained, we will then be operating under our new methodology, and I'm hoping in the most complete up-to-date way that we can. But the commitment I gave at the beginning is that we will give you good notice of any changes that we are making. And the final bit from me from now is that on relationship management, this is really important to you. This is really important to us. And I know that vast majority, almost all of you, will have really strong relationships with a named person in the CQC. And that is what I want to continue. I don't want you to feel as if that is changing at all. If anything, I want you to feel that that's being strengthened. I can't tell you yet who is going to be your relationship management as we enter into the new world of our new teams and the single assessment framework. What I can say is that this is a very important part of our new ways of working. It's a very important part of our planning, and Amy's role in particular as one of our transition specialists is to make sure that we transition properly, and that we make sure that every one of you has a relationship owner. But I also want it to become more of a team. A team role as well, so that it's not just one individual and there's, as it were, a single point of failure, whereby if that individual is on leave or that individual is off sick, you don't have that relationship anymore. So if anything, I want the real benefits of the relationship management model we've got at the moment, but I want them to be strengthened, and I want them to be deeper, so that you have you know where to go to, even if your normal relationship manager is not around at any period of time. But what I wanted to say here is that we know this is important to you, this is important to us, and it will very much be a big part of our planning for the future. So I will pause there. I'll hand back to Steph or to Sam, who I think are going to facilitate the questions, and yeah, look forward to hearing what you've or reading what you've got to say. Over to you, team. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyson, and thank you for the presentation, and thanks to everyone for all the questions you've asked so far. There's been some really good ones. One of the questions we've had is to ask for a bit more detail about some of the numbers of people we'll have in each teams around the new roles we've described, and what a typical caseload might look like for an inspector or an assessor, how many providers they might be looking after in those new roles. So Tyson, I don't know if we know the detail of that yet, or whether that's something we're still developing.
I mean, I'll start, and I don't know if Lorraine might want to come in, who's been doing a bit more of the planning on this in her own area. I mean, I think the size of the teams will vary depending upon the local area or the local team, or the size of the local team. But I think at the moment we're looking at broadly between 9 and 12 people in each team, and that they will be arranged around you'll have assessors and inspectors in adult social care, mental health, adult social care, primary medical services, and hospitals, acute hospitals. We'll also have mental health assessors and inspectors, but I don't think we'll have one of those in each team, because currently we don't have enough of our mental health colleagues. We are recruiting more, and so and there will probably be more adult social care assessors and inspectors, given the size, or there are more care homes than there are hospitals, for example. But the teams will be broad broadly made up like that. There'll be one regulatory coordinator, and there may be a regulatory officer. I think our current planning is not to have a regulatory officer in every team. So there'll be broadly 9 to 12. Some might be smaller, some might be bigger, but we're trying to keep that to a reasonable span, because we're conscious that for the operations manager, if they've got too many direct reports, it just makes their job untenable. And I think the caseload again will depend. It will depend on what's on that particular patch, and if there are a large number of care homes in a particular area, let's say in a particular part of Dorset, then the inspector and the assessor may have more on their caseload than in other areas. What I think will be different now is that what the caseload doesn't mean is that you're sort of monitoring and then thinking about when to do a comprehensive inspection or an inspection of quite a lot of the services. It'll be a lot more targeted. The assessor will have, I think we're calling it always on. The assessor will be able to take a view of all of those providers at any moment in time based on the information we hold about them, and then we will choose, depending upon whether we want to prove some particular improvement or example of good practice, or we want to try and find out about a concern that's been raised by a whistleblower. That will then lead to a targeted inspection. So I think it's a different type of caseload to what we've got at the moment. But again, I think it will vary depending upon what the makeup of the provider landscape is on a particular patch. And I'm not sure if we've yet modelled what the caseload is likely to look like. But I don't know if Lorraine or Amy have anything to add to that.
Absolutely agree with everything you've said, Tyson. We haven't yet got down to the sort of minute detail, but I would just echo that point about sort of flexibility and variance. So if I think about the Midlands, that network, there are significant variances of population and of workload type. So not every one of those teams that we're going to have in the Midlands will have the same type of workload, and therefore they might be organised a little bit differently. So they will have all of those elements that Tyson has talked about, but they might be looking at slightly different types of workload. So, you might have team number 1 here sitting next to team number 2 here, but they might be doing things in slightly different ways just because of the type of work that they've got. And as Tyson said, we really do commit to keep you, posted as much as we can and as quickly as we can on all of this, but we are still working out all of the details.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. And I think it's been covered mainly, but I think one of the things that we've really got to think about is we're going to be operating in a really different way. So the question was about caseloads and how many people will have, and actually the move and the range of people in the teams. If you think about teams, our inspection teams now, they are inspectors doing, they come out, they plan the inspections, they write the reports. It's going to shift, and there's going to be a number of people working with you. So in some scenarios, you may be speaking to the assessor quite a lot because the information is coming in from yourself or from our data or from intelligence. If people are on site, you'll be speaking to the inspectors particularly, and maybe the coordinator if they're out on inspection as well. But in terms of makeups of the team as well, there is a larger number of inspectors than there are assessors, and I think it's fair that's clear. So there will be as much on-site activity, but what you may find is that people come for shorter periods, so these really long intensive inspections, which are hard for us but equally hard for you and the people that you look after, it will change in that way as well. So it's a real shift in how we're thinking about how we inspect, assess, write reports, make judgments, all of that. So I think hopefully that answered the question. I might have gone off tangent a bit, but I think that's a key point as well.
Thank you both. The other thing I would add is that the boundaries of our teams aren't going to be sealed. I'm going to be expecting teams to be working across local boundaries as they do at the moment. Quite often teams from actually one network are working closely or on particular operational activity with another network. I'd expect that to continue. If we have particular hotspots, I would expect the deputy directors to mobilise their people as effectively as they can. And if we are doing, I'd say, a lot of inspection activity in an acute trust or a mental health hospital, that's going to be more than a single integrated team can do, even if that hospital is on their patch. And therefore, I would expect to mobilise hospital inspectors from a number of teams in order to do that particular bit of operational activity. So we will continue to be agile and fluid, but what we will be able to do is to take much more of a view of what a local area is looking like in its totality, rather than through the stovepipes of individual sectors as we do at the moment.
Thanks all. That's really helpful. And I know we've had a few questions where there's been a bit of a concern expressed that by having a number of different roles who are looking after regulatory activity, there's a danger that they might not link up or talk to each other, and information may be lost between them. So I wonder if we could talk a bit about how some of the ways of working we're developing within the teams will make sure that doesn't happen. Lorraine, could I come to you first on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand the concern, the idea that sort of too many cooks could spoil things. But actually, I think the strength of this model actually is the different perspectives and the different roles. So actually, in this model, everybody has a different role to play, and actually, this enables us to really make the best of the time that we've got, the resources we've got, and also make sure that we're only, coming out and crossing the threshold when it's appropriate to do so. And making the best use of the skills and knowledge that we've got. So the idea is that all of the elements of the team make best use of their skills and do the bits that they are best skilled for. So I actually think this is a really good model. And as I said at the beginning, I'm new to the organisation. I've come from elsewhere, and so my view is probably a slightly more objective one. And I think this is going to work really, really well. Of course, as a new model, we will have to evaluate it as we go, and obviously you'll all be key in that, in telling us how it's going and making sure that you feed into that as we go. But my view as someone who's arrived quite recently and who is part of the setting up of it is that this is the right way to go. I'll ask the others on the panel for their views as well, though. Amy.
Yeah, shall I go next? And I think it's a really important point about, how do you ensure things don't fall through the gap, and what does that look like? And I think the regulatory coordinator is going to have a really important role coordinating those teams. And what actually it will give us, I think, by having a number of people looking at a particular service. At the minute, we're very kind of location provider focused. And what you'll get through these teams is being able to look at the system across the board. So because there will be different people with different specialisms and inspecting slightly different services, what we, through our local stand-ups within our own teams and being really close, and our ops manager and the coordinator will have a really important role to make sure that we're talking not only about specific services and specific locations, but actually what does that look like across the network. And that's the real drive of this model, is to move away from this kind of individual kind of focus and individual sector focus, and to really enable us to look across the system. Obviously there are issues with that, but equally there are issues with the current system in that, often there's a single point of failure. If that person's not available, you can't move forward. And in this way, what we are hoping from the modelling that we've done in terms of how those teams will work is, if somebody is not available, somebody else will pick that up and then be able to support you. And our tech systems that are coming will really support our teams to manage that as well.
I think that was the I think that was the other point I was going to make about the technology, is that the regulatory platform which we're moving to, and also the single assessment framework, will mean that all of the information is stored where people can find it. I think at the moment human nature is quite a lot of information is stored in your brain, and that's a problem when people aren't around, or they might be stored on individual computers. I think what we will have is access to all of the relevant information for all of the team at any time. So I think as a repository of knowledge, it will be better than what we've got at the moment. That plus everyone is in the same team, and I would expect the operations manager to ensure that the team are sharing the information that they need to share. So I can understand the concern, but I think I'm feeling okay about the fact that we've got the ways of working and the safeguards in place.
Thanks all, that's really helpful. We've also had a few questions about the range of sector specialisms we'll have in the teams. So obviously we have quite big sector areas like adult social care or hospitals at the moment, but within those there are a number of different types of services and subsectors. So thinking about dental services or the difference between residential social care and home care. I wonder if we could say a bit about how we're going to make sure we've got the right range of sector specialisms in these teams and for team members to call upon. Tyson, can we start with you there?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think the first thing to say is that the dentists will continue to be regulated from within our National Operations Directorate. They will work closely with their local team. So I would expect the oral health inspectors for London to work closely with the integrated teams in London, so that we can have a view of how dentistry and oral health fits into the overall view of care. But they will remain a smallish specialist team in our National Operations Directorate. Otherwise, I mean, residential and domiciliary care will be dealt with by the assessors and the inspectors in the relevant teams, and I think they are at the moment. But what I would want is for there to be expertise shared amongst the teams, and where we have particular experts in one area, maybe within the same network, experts in domiciliary care, good practice in domiciliary care, I'd expect them to be sharing that with their colleagues elsewhere. So I think it would be similar to what we've got at the moment, in that some of our inspectors are specialists in some parts of their activity, learning disabilities, people with autism, for example, and I think it's important that they can continue to work together. We will also have the senior specialists, of course, and I think they will also include, as well as the 4 key sectors, they will also include safeguarding, and they will also include learning disability and people with autism. So there will be other forms of expertise, but we'll still have people with all of that expertise within the wider team, and we'll just need to make sure that we continue to work together. I don't know, Amy, anything to add to that?
I think that's right, and I think the senior specialists will really support the operations teams to make sure we've got that. And also, we are still using experts by experience. We'll still be using specialist advisors as we're out and about, not even necessarily just on inspection, but also when we're looking at things that might be you can do in a more desk-based way. So we will continue to have at our fingertips the expertise that we need to make sure that we're making the right judgments.
Great, thanks both. And I think might stick with you, Amy, for the next question. So there's been a few people ask about whether in our new team structure providers will have a single point of contact, a named person they always link in with, or whether it will look more like talking to multiple people at different times depending on the type of query they've got.
I think it's going to be more of the latter, but I think what will happen is you will form those relationships as we go through. So your relationships, there are a number of inspectors and managers who will still be the same people, so you will still have access to them as we go forward, obviously. But within a team, I think the idea is that if it's a new query or something that you haven't broached before, it will come probably through our coordinator, and we need to work that out. We don't know what the numbers of that information is, but if it's linked to an inspection or a site visit or something that's happened, it's very likely that you'll be speaking to that inspector. And if it's something to do with information that you want to share or send in, it's likely to be the assessor. So I think there will be a group of people, but I don't think it will be hundreds of people. It'll be quite a small group within a particular team that you'll be able to talk to, which I think has advantages in that sometimes emails come in to those individuals and they might sit there for 2 or 3 weeks if somebody's on leave or if they're absent, because actually we don't monitor people's individual inboxes. So what we will find is, again, through our technology, we will be alerted, and a number of people will be alerted to the fact that you're trying to get hold of us or you've got questions for us, and we'll be able to look at it from that perspective. And I know some of you will be thinking, actually, I like one person and that suits me, and that's how we want to continue. But others of you will think, actually, it's good to have that variety, and trying to get the balance between that will be something the teams will work out as they get moving. And it may be that, you know, for a 6-month period you have one contact because you've got a particular need for that, and then later on you might need somebody else, and to have a range of people that you can talk to about different things, I think, will be helpful.
I mean, I think, thank you, Amy. I think this is a key area, which is why I wanted to focus on it in the presentation. And Amy's absolutely right, and I think that will work, and I think that will work well. But yeah, we'll keep it under review, and we'll listen to your feedback. And when we're doing this in real time, as it were, if this isn't working for you, then let us know, and we'd be happy to adapt. If we had to move to a single name contact model, then I think we could do that. Yeah, if you're running a care home and you're used to dealing with one person, and that person is the assessor, I mean, I don't think the assessor is going to tell you to go away if actually you should be speaking to the inspector. So I think if you're more comfortable having a single line in, I'm sure that will work in practice. But we'll definitely keep it we'll definitely keep it under review and see how it works. And the other thing I think is important, and I alluded to this, is that we are going to do proper handovers, and we're going to have probably a 3-month period where we're forming into our new teams, and that will allow colleagues to get to know their new manager, if it's new, their new colleagues, but we will also make sure that we do the proper provider handover. So if, for example, you're a GP practice and you've got one provider relationship, you've got an inspector at the moment you're used to dealing with, that inspector is going to work in another integrated team, possibly because they live closer to that team. What we will make sure during that period is that not only does that person say goodbye, they hand over the relationship properly, so that before we move into the new arrangements, you're very clear about who your new team are, and you're very clear about who you should contact when. So I'm confident that this will work well. It's a bit different to what we're doing at the moment, but I'm very happy to keep it under review, because I really do understand how important strong relationships are, both for us and for you, and we need to make sure that we continue to have those going forward.
Thanks, Tyson. We've also had some questions as a query about whether we could just confirm who in the new teams will be making the final decisions about ratings or judgments for a provider, and also whether there'll be a place in the structure where those decisions might be quality assured to make sure we're being consistent and making the right decisions. I don't know, Tyson, do you want to start with that?
Do you want to kick that one off, Amy? Is that one you could have a go at?
Yeah, I certainly can. So the judgments, so our inspectors and our assessors will be making judgments. So our inspectors will be making those judgments as part of the inspection in the same way that they do now, looking on site, gathering evidence, picking up evidence that you're giving and sharing with them, and bringing those back into their teams and sharing that with the assessors. Our inspectors are likely to be doing most of our enforcement work, and our assessors will ultimately be kind of hitting the button on the reports and what that looks like, but they will be gathering evidence from a different perspective. So a lot of their evidence that they'll be gathering will be from data and information that you share, so that our inspectors on site can really focus on observation of care and talking to your staff and talking to the people and relatives that use services. So it will remain the judgments and the decisions. Obviously there are quality assurance processes that we will have in place to look at their work, but the judgments will still sit with our inspectors and our assessors, who are the same people who are inspectors at this moment in time, and that's where it will rest.
And of course, I would expect the operations managers, the deputy directors, and the directors like Lorraine to ensure that there is consistency and quality assurance on their patch, and we will use the hub to assure what we're doing. I think the other thing worth saying, and what will be different to what we've got today, is first of all, you'll be able to see more of a real-time view of where you are in terms of rating. So rather than having the 5 key questions rated each time we cross the threshold, and that there could be a number of years between those, you'll be able to see the ratings constantly, and they may change. They may change as a result of information that we've got in. They may change as a result of cross the threshold activity. And so on SAFE, for example, you will be able to see that your requires improvement, but you'll be able to see where on requires improvement you are, whether you're close to good or whether you're close to inadequate, and therefore, if you're moving in the wrong direction, you will know about it before we tell you, almost, because you'll be able to view that, and if you're pushing to become good or to become outstanding, you'll be able to see how far away you are from that. So it's almost as if there's a needle that is telling you exactly where you are on the scale, on each of the 5 key questions. And we will be moving away from the model whereby we write very long reports and then we get involved in a long factual accuracy process, which is very time consuming for you as well. What we're intending to do is to let you know what we know. We will give you a download of the information that we know about you, and what that we will publish about you. That will then give you, I think we're thinking a week, to give you a chance to check it for factual accuracy. So if things are wrong in there, then you can tell us and we will change them, and then that process will continue. So it's much more of a continuous, ongoing process. You will have a much better sense of where you're rated against each of the 5 key questions than you do at the moment. It won't be we inspect you, write a long report, you do a big factual accuracy, and then we do a bit of compromising here and there, and then that's it for another few years. This will be a much more real time a sense of what we know about you, and you'll be able to have the relationship with us based on that.
Thanks all. We've also had some questions around who will visitor service, who will be on-site assessments, and I know in the slides we talked about the inspector leading those visits, but do we think other roles will also accompany the inspector? So I know people have asked about the assessor in particular, and do we have a sense of how many people might be part of an on-site visit from the new teams?
Shall I'll kick off, and then I might hand over to Amy or Lorraine. I think, I mean, the inspector is going to be leading the on-site activity. There may be occasions where there's more than one inspector. I think it's quite common for 2 inspectors to work together. That might not be necessary, given that we're only going to be looking at in a fairly sort of targeted way. They may be supported by the regulatory coordinator or the regulatory officer, in the way that assistant inspectors do at the moment. I mean, I want the assessor to be spending their time across all of the information. Those are going to be very busy roles, but I also want the assessor to know what's going on, and I want them to have relationships. I want them to see what's happening in a care home, in a hospital, in a GP practice. So in the way that I go and observe inspections as often as I can, I would expect all of the team to have that kind of knowledge. I don't want any of them to become entirely death-bound, but it will be the inspector who will be leading the crossing the threshold activity based on what's agreed with the assessor when they look at the information available. Is that about right, Amy?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think I think it works very well. It should work very well in that way. So I don't really have huge amounts to add to that, because I know there's a lot of questions as well, but I think that really works.
Great, thanks both. We are running out of time, unfortunately, so we might need to kind of wrap up in a few minutes. And just to say, apologies if we haven't been able to answer your question. We will be taking all these away and making sure that when we publish more information on these changes on our website, we take into account the queries you've raised today. And I know also there were a number of questions about the timeline for implementing some of these changes. We will share links to where you can find out information on that on our website as well, so you have the latest up-to-date information. But I might just hand back to Tyson now to take us through the last couple of slides to wrap us up for today.
No, certainly. Thank you, Sam. And in terms of the timeline, it's not all absolutely clear at the moment. We've done a lot of our people change, and so the people who will be part of the integrated team know what roles they will be playing. So if you're currently an inspector, you'll know based on a preference exercise whether you will be an inspector or an assessor, and you should know by now what your integrated team is likely to be. So there's some certainty there. From the early new year, we will ask our teams to start forming. As I said, getting to know each other, handing over the staffing relationships, handing over the provider relationships, and then probably in early spring, we will have those teams formed. The regulatory platform and the single assessment framework will then be rolled out at some point a bit later in 2023. We're not entirely clear yet what that date will be. We're just doing some final planning. But once we've done that, we will then train the teams, just before use to make sure they're ready to go, and then we'll be operating in the new world. But as I said, we'll give you plenty of notice of that, but it's not imminent. And the advantage of doing webinars at this time is it allows you to allows us to tell you what we're planning, so that we've got time to carry on the dialogue. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you a bit of a sense of where we're going. I'm really grateful to you for your time this morning and for spending an hour with us. The slide in front of you tells you how to keep in touch. Lots of ways of keeping in touch with us and finding out more. And as Sam said, we will look at all of the questions, and we'll change our sort of online FAQs and whatever accordingly. And I would encourage you, if you've got the time, also to attend the other webinars coming up that will give you a sense of some of the other pieces of the jigsaw. So I think that's it from me, apart from a slide that says thank you in probably all the languages in the world. Really grateful for your time, and really looking forward to working with you as we move forward into this exciting new way of doing our business and working with you. Hope you all have a good afternoon. Thank you.